What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JFK Debates Project. I'm your host, Matt Douthit from Dallas, Texas. Tonight is debate night. This is how I originally envisioned this channel, with this time I'm moderating, and we have the two JFK assassination TikTok guys. We have Skip from JFK 60 years later, and we have Josh from Reason and Reality. These guys, as far as I can tell, are the only guys on TikTok who have accounts just on the Kennedy assassination. And Josh, Skip, Josh, how are you guys doing?
Been great.
Great.
Hi,
Hey,
Matt.
great. Thank you guys for coming on. Uh,
It's good to be with you.
Great. Excellent. Excellent. I'm really pumped about this. You guys have been kind of going back, kind of battling each other a little back and forth on TikTok, and I was like, fellas, I got the perfect platform for it. So let's start right off the bat. Let's jump right into it. All right. We have 10 topics that we're going to discuss tonight. And we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to jump right into it. So, the first topic is the single bullet theory. And where else to start on the JFK assassination than the single bullet theory? I mean, you know what I mean?
All
So,
right. I'll take the moniker Oswald Onlyist. So I don't know if I would go with the moniker Warren Commission defender, but the Warren Commission laid down the basic premise, so many years ago and has a lot of holes tried to poke into it, no pun intended. So I'm happy to lay down, I guess, my position. I would say maybe this is a place to start. Uh, I like some of the diagrams that have been put out, some of the popular ones. I think Dale Myers' animation is persuasive. I think the diagram in Case Closed showing the single bullet is persuasive. Um, and I don't know how much level of detail we want to get into, Matt, on either side, but maybe I could just start there. And I know either of you, but Skip in particular, will probably have lots of fodder to say, hold on a sec. But I mean, we can just start with one of those. And where do you
well,
want to go off either one of those?
yeah,
I'll start with my favorite quote from my favorite forensic pathologist, Dr. Cheryl Wecht. And you probably could have guessed that that was coming. Uh, the single bullet theory is the sine qua non of the Warren Commission. That's sine qua non, if you've never heard that before, is the Latin phrase without which there is not. And it sums up, I think, beautifully the fact that without the single bullet theory, the entire rest of the Warren Commission report is for naught. It's 26 volumes of fluff that accompanies a 900-page prosecution of Lee Harvey Oswald. So, single bullet theory is leaned on heavily by, and in an effort uh, to not simply put people into two camps of uh, nicknames. Um, I'm actually the one that coined the phrase Oswald Onlyus, and that's an interesting story, but I'll say Oswald Onlyus just to get it out there further into the ether. On the Oswald only camp, the single bullet theory must be heavily relied upon because if there is no single bullet, then by definition, there is a conspiracy. I'll just say that if there's more than one bullet, there's a conspiracy. And that's before we get into the other things that are admittedly wrong with the Warren Commission report. The single bullet theory is difficult uh, to for people to buy into, uh, either I think on a factual basis or just even in the larger pantheon of what all happened and why. Um, so I'm going to disagree with some of the fundamental things brought forward in the single bullet theory including the part about the first shot must have missed because I absolutely believe there were more than three shots, but you're stuck with the single bullet theory if you're stuck with only the three shells that are found on the sixth floor of the school book depository. And there's some problems right away with that, including the way the Dallas police fouled the crime scene in the middle of uh, the investigation. Pictures exist or are testified to exist of the bullets, both the shell casings being in a picture side by side, three parallel to each other, and then the other picture exists of approximately where they lay on the floor. And much like the trajectory of the bullet, uh, the way that shells would be ejected from a side ejecting bolt action rifle, um, much would be made about that. Well, why is this bullet way over here? I don't get on my channel, at least, I don't get into the weeds necessarily of all of that because the crime scene was fouled uh, and it kind of throws out sort of the chain of custody of that, of those shells and how all that went down. Uh, there are other little minor details that go along with the single bullet theory um, that I've always been interested in and don't necessarily have an answer to. And it doesn't necessarily prove Oswald's guilt or innocence. I don't, I'm, I don't know if I'm truly worried about that at this particular moment than I am the larger scale of the case. But have we ever stopped to ask ourselves why a trained Marine who, according to Oswald Onlyist, was a verified sharpshooter, and there's some problems with his Marine record on that. But why he sets out to commit the crime of the century with a strip clip that held 6 rounds that only had 4 in it. Like right from the get go, before we even get to bullets tumbling and yawing, this guy owns no more rounds than the last 4. There's no Mannlicher Carcano rounds found at North Beckley or Ruth Payne's house. Yet, presumably, he would, and I don't see any evidence that he actually ordered a full box of Western ammunition Carcano cartridges from Klein Sporting Goods, even though they were there in the catalog. And I think it was like for an extra $1.50 or whatever. I'd have to check the record on that. This guy owns no ammunition. Oswald Onlyist will say he used it all up practicing for this. He spent one on Walker, problems with that, of course. And he goes into November 22nd, 1963, with the last 4 rounds that he owns in a strip clip that should have fallen from the rifle when he ejected the 3rd round. And we can talk about that. That doesn't have anything to do with tumbling or yawing or the size of the wound on Connolly's back or the angle that JFK had fallen into in order to make back to neck trajectory work. I want to know about the ammunition. So I don't know. You got a timer on me? That's 5 minutes. Let's give Josh a chance.
All right, Josh, what say
I
you?
mean, yeah, that's a lot of issues, and I'm happy to get into each one of them. But what I would say is I think those are far afield, or not. They're a little bit afield from the single bullet per se. So let me just go down the list of what I would classify as specifically single bullet uh, evidence that I think says the single bullet is a reality. I mean, we can just start with Kennedy's back wound. So there's, of course, holes in his suit coat and his jacket. There's bullet wipe on those on the jacket and or on the clothing, which indicates an entrance wound. It's a small round puncture type wound. I think that wound in his back is an entrance wound. Um, we can talk about, maybe get into the nuances of where the holes were in the clothing versus where the hole was in his back. But I do think, just for summary's sake, I think there is evidence of bunching of his jacket or his clothing. There are numerous photos at various points along the motorcade where his jacket was bunched, and in other points in his life previous to November 22nd, where his suit coat would bunch. So I think it's not a far leap. We're talking about centimeters or inches at most, and if there was bunching, which I don't know if Matt's I'm gonna test his preparation, but there's a photograph that you've shown in some of your debates where I think we don't need to show it right now, but it's very close to, I think, when the second shot was. And I think you look at it, or others look at it, and say his right shoulder is the bunching. Others say no, it's actually bunching. I think that looks like bunching to me. But in any event, I think there's evidence of bunching that solves the problem of where the hole goes versus in the clothing versus the back. So for a number of reasons, as I already said, that's an entrance hole. Then crucially, there is injuries internal within Kennedy's back and neck. And I'm just going to quote from the autopsy report, which is CE 387. There's bruising to the strap, quote, strap muscles of the right side of the neck. There's bruising of, quote, the fascia around the trachea, end quote. There's, quote, contusion of the parietal pleura and the extreme apical portion of the upper right lobe of the lung. We all probably, at least I do, have to ask ChatGPT what that actually means, but there's basically bruising to the top portion of the lung, or the cavity just outside the lung. And there's injury. This is sort of restating another point that's already said, but there's, quote, injury to the right lateral wall of the trachea. That's all from the autopsy report. Now, I know there's some debate about, and Matt's even said this among others, that there's no, quote, independent verification of that. And I don't know, honestly, if that's true or not, frankly, but it's in the autopsy report. So there's evidence of internal injuries beyond just what the claim has been made, and there's evidence of that they couldn't probe that entrance wound very far. And I think there's reasons why that's the case. We can get into that maybe in a second. But in any event, there's internal injuries. There's the wound in the front of the neck where the tracheotomy, of course, was performed. I think that was a small exit wound. The Parkland doctors, I don't think that we can totally trust them on exactly how small it was. They weren't getting out measuring devices and whatnot in the frantic minutes where they're performing work on Kennedy to try to save his life. But in any event, it was a small enough wound that they thought it was an entrance. They didn't see the entrance in the back, so there were some comments about that it was an entrance. I think some of the doctors have later said, actually, now we realize it was an exit. But I think that's an exit. I think the bullet did not have to be totally in yaw or tumbling or whatever at that point. It could be just barely starting to yaw, and that, the way that the skin stretches, and the wound could be smaller even than 7 millimeters like the back wound was, or 6.5. So exit, it goes into Connolly. I don't think there's any evidence that there was bullet wipe on Connolly's clothing. Now, I think the Warren Commission says the clothing was laundered, so we don't know one way or the other. But in any event, there's no bullet wipe. So it's not like we know for sure it was another shot that entered, in which case there would be bullet wipe on Connolly's clothing. And I think the wound in his back is not perfectly round like the back wound in Kennedy's is. It's, there's this term that everyone debates about, ovoid. If I understand it correctly, it's 15 millimeters by, I'm not sure exactly what, maybe 6 millimeters or something. I don't know what. I think the crucial measurement is 15 millimeters. That is more than double the diameter of a Carcano round, or Carcano round, 15 millimeters. So it doesn't have to be totally tumbling parallel with Connolly's back, but it does indicate to me, at least, that it's in yaw. And then once it hits the back, it starts to really yaw or tumble. And Internal wounds, again, consistent with the bullet traveling through Connolly. It breaks his ribs. It exits below his nipple. It hits his wrist. It goes into his thigh. And um, I think all of those wounds can be lined up. There's a lot of debate about the trajectory. I get that. We can maybe get into it. They all can be lined up. I think I've said the two diagrams that I think are persuasive to me. I think as the as the bullet lost velocity, it could create the nature of CE399, which of course wasn't pristine, as you, I know you all understand. It was flattened, and the alternatives to me are far less plausible and do not account for the alternative explanations for CE399 or the wounds are less plausible and do not account for the evidence as coherently as the single bullet theory does. So that would be my summary.
As is perfectly normal with Oswald onlyists, because the single bullet theory is the only thing that is plausible to them, they have to then figure out how to make it work. And so let's go back for a second and let me make the record clear, and not just in this context, but also against the off chance that 200,000 people somehow see me saying this at any point. I would make perfectly clear for the record that I have never, ever debated whether or not Kennedy was shot from behind in the back. I don't have any issue with shot from the 6th floor of the school book depository either, by the way. Yes, he was shot in the back. I do take issue on the bunching issue because I think that's a bunch of claptrap made up to justify the distance of the hole in Kennedy's clothing versus the hole in his back. But regardless of that, the Warren Commission, in its report, our own inspector, to be specific, in both the depositions that he took and then later in his summations, continuously referred to it as a neck wound, neck wound, neck wound, neck wound. And if I hear somebody say neck wound, and you didn't, Josh, I'm not picking on you, but when people start saying
the front neck wound and the back wound,
but when they start referring to the wound in the back as a neck wound, that's where we part ways, because it was Dr. Berkeley who placed on the autopsy face sheet, puts the level of the back wound at approximately T3, not near close enough to the base of the neck to then account for the neck. So how do Oswald onlyists make that work? Well, they just make up diagrams of Kennedy leaning forward in such a way at the moment that happened that, a shot, whatever, I don't even care what the angle by degrees measurement was. It was down. We can agree it was downward. Bullet's going down. How does it suddenly go up and then exit through his neck if the neck wound is an exit wound? Okay, we really are going to be here all night.
Well,
on
so
just a single bullet theory.
Yeah, right. Where did it exit then? Where, if you admit it's a back wound, where did it exit? I know Matt's theory and others, but where did it exit?
Okay, fair question. I am open to the possibility without resolution myself, that it didn't exit.
So do you ascribe to the short, shallow wound theory then?
I subscribe to that because it's in the Sibbert and O'Neill report.
Who you admit are not doctors or pathologists. They're just were observing, right?
As objective an observer as could be, like more so than the naval brass in charge or the non-forensic pathologists that were, for reasons still unknown to this day, chosen to do the single most important autopsy in the world, Humes and Boswell. Okay, but I'm also open to the possibility that what Paul Landis has said is also possible. I think it. I have some issues, and we're not going to. We can talk about Paul Landis later. But why would this nice old man lie to us when he says that he found CE 399 on the upholstery of the limo and that he's the one that put it in the stretcher? And we haven't even gotten to the problems with the stretcher yet.
You're talking about Paul Landis finding the bullet, and
Yes.
you're saying that you don't think you lied. Is that what you said?
I'm saying that the Paul Landis is in November, October 2023. That story comes out, and people lose their ever loving minds. And I am like, wow, case closed. Uh, Not really. I mean, I'm not. The jury's still out on Paul Landis for me, but I'm at least
Well,
open to the possibility that he's not lying, and that the bullet that he finds, that CE 399, is the back wound. Now, that is just going to be a variation of a conspiracy theory, but
so
I'm open to it.
I don't think Paul Landis, and this is probably going to be a repeating theme for me. Um, I don't think Paul Landis is lying, but I think he's wrong. And witnesses have at least two problems. And this goes for any humans, either side of this debate. Um, Witnesses perceive things incorrectly, so not all eyewitness perception is correct. This is not earth-shattering news. Nor is human memory correct, especially when it's over time. And these are all not earth-shattering things. But someone can, in good faith, think that they have a memory of something that didn't happen. And that's either in the short term or especially the long term, like Paul Landis. I mean, this is just a quick tangent. We won't go down this road, but I listened to it recently, and it reminded me of it. If any of you, if you've listened to, or anyone listening has listened to Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, he has an episode about Brian Williams fabricating to some people this story about him being on, a military plane that took fire in over Afghanistan or Iraq or something, and then he got called out on it and lost his job. And Malcolm Gladwell has an episode where he tries to revive Brian Williams's credibility or legacy by saying, "Hey, look, maybe he just made a mistake because that's how human memory works." And he gives an example of from himself, Malcolm Gladwell, of 9/11, and him and a friend have two totally different theories or different memories of what happened when they met each other and talked on 9/11. Point is, even what we think are certain memories are susceptible to being wrong. So I think Paul Landis is just simply wrong. Whether he's lying or not intentionally, I think it maybe is possible, but I don't think he is. So that's a side note. And then what I would also say on the shallow bullet thing, and this is a problem, I think, for conspiracy theorists as well. Conspiracy theorists have a target that they can hone in on and focus in on and criticize to the end of the day, which is the Warren Commission, even to some extent the HSCA, or other official investigations or more formal investigations, I'll say. And they don't have to subject their own theories to the same scrutiny. And I think if we just had this one little shallow bullet theory scrutinized with any level of rigor, like the conspiracy theorists have put the Warren Commission or other official investigations to, it would fall like a house of cards. So you're telling me that at what feet per second does a bullet need to go, a Carcano round need to go to just puncture enough into soft tissue, not hitting bone, where it only goes in the half a length of a finger and then falls out later? That, I think, is a near impossible thing, but I would love to see some testing to be proven wrong. Skip.
But that's exactly what you're telling me about Connolly's thigh wound. Wasn't
It
enough velocity.
went through two humans. Went through three. The wrist, the two, and two torsos.
Didn't yaw, by the way. Made a small round hole in his clothing. I don't know about bullet wipe on the pants. We could certainly look at that. But
So you
then,
think that's a separate bullet, possibly?
yes,
From what direction?
pick one. Daltex, sixth floor. You know,
So yeah, and again, I think those also fall flat. If it was Dow Tex, let's just say for
okay,
fun, if you're telling me it's just going to go from the Dow Tex, not hit anybody, not hit Connolly, not hit Kennedy, not hit any part of the car, hit his thigh, barely puncture and bounce out, and then where's that bullet? So those are problems, I think.
I think that uh, what stretches the limits of credulity when it comes to Connolly's thigh wound specifically, and as it might apply, again, I'm not 100% sold on Paul Landis. Like call it a gut feeling. I'm like, for the very reason that you said that people's memories and the way they recall things, and especially 60 years later in 2023, the way people remember things, there's some issues that need to be accounted for. It's for that very reason that I don't think the case will ever be closed in general. Let me just throw that out there. Okay. But if you're going to apply that level of questioning to a guy like Paul Landis, who was perhaps closer to the limousine than anyone else, then you got a real problem in holding up Howard Brennan as the star witness for the Warren Commission or Helen Markham as the star witness of the J.D. Tippit shooting, because the same human flaws that you would assign to somebody like Paul Landis would apply to those two. And when you do that, when you throw out Howard Brennan, which I think you have to, uh, then the Warren Commission has no star witness that puts Oswald and Oswald only in the sixth floor of the window. And by the way, so that we're clear, I have never said that there was nobody in the sixth floor window. I think somebody was absolutely there shooting a weapon. I don't even, you know what? I don't even care about the whole Mauser Carcano thing. There's people can chew on that all they want. I'm less focused on that. I'm more focused on why Oswald onlyists love some witnesses' testimony and memory, but when they don't love it, they're quick to say people's memories are flawed, man. They're only human. And
I
it was all that time ago.
so I'm not necessarily the guy who thinks, you know, who privileges certain witnesses over others. However, I do think some witnesses can be privileged only to the extent that their testimony lines up with the forensic physical evidence. So, in other words, if the forensic and physical evidence standing alone without eyewitness testimony starts to point in a direction, and and then and I'm not saying this is a ironclad theory, but this is how I think out loud about it. And then you have witnesses who start to say things that or do say things that corroborate and make a coherent and as I think Oswald Onius like to say, parsimonious theory, then I do think some witnesses are more credible than others in that respect. But I agree with you to say that if it's a human being, uh, they can be unreliable. And the thing is their statements, one part can be true, the other part can be false from the same witness. That's just how eyewitness testimony and memory works. Anyway, so that was what I was going to say.
All right, so the next topic is going to be the headshot. All right. Who wants to go first? Josh?
Number one, I think the headshot, not surprisingly, was from behind. Now, why do I say that? Um, I think that in no particular order, I think the autopsy photographs, or what we know of the autopsy photographs, I've referenced this in a few TikToks before, or maybe recent. I think the Ida Docs drawing or drawings, I'm not sure how many there are. Maybe one of you can correct me if I'm wrong. Four.
Just
Okay.
four.
Yeah. I'm talking about the one where it shows what I would say is the hand on the back of the head and there's the bullet hole, right? Uh, where I think the head was probably pieced together. And correct me if I'm wrong. Also, I think there's like bootlegged actual autopsy photographs of that drawing. So we have not only the drawing but the photograph, and that to me shows pretty clearly a relatively small round hole in the back of Kennedy's head. So I think the autopsy photographs, if we were able to see all of them, and I think some people who have seen all of them, the forensic pathologists who looked at them through on the HSCA, for example, and some other individuals who've actually got the chance to look at all the original autopsy photographs, who I think are generally credible, say that they're clear and they don't show a massive gaping wound in the back of the head. We can talk about the Parkland doctors if we need to. They don't show that, at least that's my understanding. The x-rays also don't show that. The x-rays show the wound in the back. They show the fracture patterns radiating forward, so that the x-rays confirm it. And along the way here, of course, what the conspiracy theorists have to say is, gee, the photographs are pretty damning. I mean, if those are accurate, gosh, what are we going to say? If the x-rays are accurate, what are we going to say about those? Well, actually, I got it. They're forged. They're faked. We don't really have all the evidence of who did it, when they did it, how they did it, but gosh, they're so damning to our position. They must have been forged. I mean, I get that is a massive generalization, but that's, I think, what happens. And so there's that. I think then we talk about, I've mentioned this on a TikTok as well, the beveling of the back of the skull bone in the back. I think that beveling is an indication of a rear entrance. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Cyril Wecht even says that he thinks the head wound was from the rear, but I'm open to being corrected on that. Uh,
He thought that there were two headshots, one from the rear and then one from the front. Just for the audience listening.
okay,
And
yeah. So then I would say he the one I'm talking about, he would concur because he's seen the evidence and he's no dummy. He knows his stuff, right? And so he has to try to come up with other theories to maybe make up a second shot. But at least as to the entrance wound on the autopsy photographs, the X-rays and whatnot, he has to say, "Gosh, I got to shrug my shoulders and say, yeah, that's an entrance wound from the rear." Um, and I think some other reasons why, on the Zapruder film, it shows certainly from frame 313 on to, I don't know, 370 or 80 or something. The back of Kennedy's head is totally intact, and the front is where the injury is. I mean, you can't see in many instances where exactly Kennedy's ear is, but it's basically above and forward from where I think his ear is. So what, again, the conspiracy theorists have to say is, well, yeah, it does show that, but it's forged. It's faked. Somebody got their hands on it. Okay, when, how, who, when, or why? Like, not why, but how and who. That's a common default when at least with respect to the headshot, when the evidence goes against you, say it's faked. And then the 313 image or 314, the bone and bloods and brains spray, as gruesome as it is mostly going up and forward. I've seen Matt's diagram among others where it kind of shows other directions, but that's just because it's, again, to be morbid, it's just an explosion. But the primary, those, that high contrast image, I think that the HSCA did, in addition to just the color images, show upward and forward. I think that's not conclusive of a rearward shot, but it's certainly an indication that shows a rear entrance to the head. So that's enough for now, mate. Let's see what Skip is going to respond.
Skip, what say you?
Just right from the outset, I have recently been influenced about the headshot by Tink Thompson, and it's within the last 5 years. But Tink Thompson is on the point of two headshots from both rear and front. But that's not a possibility for you if you're an Oswald onlyist. You're not open to that because you only have 3 shells on the school book depository floor. And you got a further problem because we know that one round hits the concrete and clips Tig. So you got even more of a problem.
What's the
But I,
forensic evidence or medical evidence of the second shot
the
to the head?
second shot to the head.
Because there's the left side of the left hemisphere of the brain is totally untouched. There's no bullet fragments in the left hemisphere of the brain. Uh, if that shot has to come from the grassy knoll, the angles among the many 3D renderings that have been done, that, to me at least, and tell me where this is wrong, there would have to have been an exit somehow left of Kennedy's center line of his head.
I want to go back just for a second to the Parkland doctors. Now, one of the issues that I have all along with Oswald Onius and the headshot is this abject denial that they have that the back of Kennedy's head isn't completely ruined. And why is that? A week ago, when we were talking about the single bullet theory, uh, one of the things Josh said was the Parkland doctors, um, they looked at the neck wound and it was pretty small, and then they thought it was an entry wound. Uh, but they never turned Kennedy over, which is a thing that you hear from Oswald Onlyus a lot. So they didn't realize there was a back wound, and had they realized that there was a back room, then they would have said, "Oh, well, then must be a single bullet that made both wounds." And I have a problem with indicting the skills of the Parkland doctors at the time. And then we carry that forward when we start talking about the headshot, when you cannot have looked at this case without seeing the image that the montage collage is the proper word, the collage of 25 plus, you know, trained doctors, the number of people who are willing to state publicly on their reputations that the wound that they saw and was back here, and then go on to put their hand back here to demonstrate it, coupled with the bootleg autopsy photo showing what looks like a waterfall coming down the back of Kennedy's head, all right, in stark contrast to the Ida Cox drawing of the gloved hand pulling the scalp up and pointing to the black dot, which is ostensibly proof of the rear entry headshot. The Because Kennedy's face isn't completely destroyed, we know that there's really no place for that bullet to go out the side, and so a lot of the only explanation for that, for a rear that particular rear entry headshot, is that, well, it was then now going this way and out the right side of his head, uh, except Oswald's already on the right. So that doesn't make sense to me. And then I've seen, uh, well, the compression of, a bullet impacting that small space forced this explode, that all, I'm not a doctor, you understand? But then again, none of us are. So now I'm back to, are we really going to say that all these Parkland doctors didn't know what they were talking about? In Dallas, Texas, sorry, Matt, you live there, but it's the gun capital of the gun state and the gunniest set of states that anyone has ever known.
It's not the full
Uh,
metal jacketed military round capital.
my point is that Parkland doctors were seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of gunshot wounds per year, and that's part of the context of this thing, because if you're an Oswald onlyist, you must discredit somehow everyone that doesn't fit the narrative.
So, what follow-up question then? Uh, they're not all, that montage of witnesses. They're not all doctors. First of all, they're medical personnel. I'll grant you that. But then, how do you square the photographs, the X-rays, and the Zapruder film showing the back of the head intact. Do you think then that all three of those categories of evidence are forged and faked? Because those
Uh,
are hard evidences to me, which are more reliable, in my opinion, than human beings in a traumatic, frantic experience tried to save the most important man in the world.
okay, let me just tell you where I stand on the Zapruder film. Um, First of all, I am not convinced. Um, in fact, I have stressed strongly on my channel, only on my channel. It's the only place I talk about it, that I don't believe that the Zapruder film, the extant film straight out of the camera that's sitting in the National Archives, has been tampered with. The Zapruder film itself is the ultimate Rorschach test. That is to say, you see what you see.
I agree in some respects that the Zapruder film, like many things in this case or this assassination, there is in the eye of the beholder. It's a Rorschach test. However, so in general, I agree with that. However, there are some things that cannot be reasonably debated. I agree with you. Skip and I do agree on some things. The driver did not do it. I think that's not reasonably debatable just on looking at the Zapruder film. I also think it's not reasonably debatable. In other words, a Rorschach test shows you an ink blot and anybody could see any type of thing in that ink blot. The back of Kennedy's head is not subject to debate in the Zapruder film. It is intact. It is clearly intact, in my opinion, and I think in any reasonable viewing of it is clearly intact. So you either have to say that the Zapruder film is wrong and the back of his head was actually not intact, and all the Parkland medical personnel are accurate, or it is intact and all the Parkland medical personnel, their testimony is flawed. And so that's where one little example of how I think the Zapruder film can answer a lot of questions, given that it even is in general a Rorschach test. Because I just don't think we don't need to go down this rabbit hole. But if you really stop and look and think about, was the Zapruder film altered to show just on his head wound that the front right was where the wound was and not the back right? um, the amount of assumptions and frankly crazy you have to get into to say that the Zapruder film was altered just doesn't hold up. I mean, how many other videos were there and photograph, to say nothing of photographs of Dealey Plaza at the time? So if you're altering the Zapruder film, you also have to go and make sure all the other ones line up with your alterations. That's one problem with sort of the alteration theory. But probably the biggest one is, if you're going to alter the Zapruder film to show that the back of the head is intact, you're gonna miss the biggest reason why conspiracy theorists think there was a conspiracy. You're gonna miss the back into the left movement of Kennedy. You're gonna forget to change that, but you will go change his head. That doesn't hold up either. There's a bunch of other reasons. So long way of saying the Zapruder film, in my view, just was not altered, uh, and it clearly shows the back of the head intact, which does mean the Parkland doctors or medical personnel, just for whatever reason, for a lot of them, we don't need to go into all of them, but there are plenty of reasons why their testimony is not reliable. It shows a head wound in the front right, and uh, that's consistent with where Oswald was on the sixth floor.
All right,
Okay,
Skip.
so we're agreed on the driver didn't do it, and I heavily lean towards the Zapruder film was not altered, and that's one that I get a lot in my comments also, and you will too. Uh, so back to the doctors. Uh, One of the comments that I get all the time, I'm just drawing from my personal experience, that one of the favorite comments, and I got a couple of people, Josh is not the only foil out there, and I actually, I'll say this before we run out of time. What I appreciate about what Josh is doing is bringing it to the table and actually making videos. On TikTok, you're either creating original content with original thoughts, or at least asking questions or doing a silly dance. But many of the commenters that I pick up along the way are simply there to comment. They don't make any videos, but they are armed with the typical retorts that I've seen time and time again. One of those retorts always is the Parkland doctors were not forensic pathologists. It was not their job to determine trajectories and bullet wipe and all of that. They were just trying to save his life. In fact, they never turned JFK over, and that to me is hogwash because we're talking about an environment in which that dealt with gunshot wounds on a daily basis. Some, I don't know every case, some of them surely approaching a case as serious as JFK's. The fact that it was the president of the United States takes nothing away from the gunshot wounds that the Parkland doctors dealt with the day before, or the week before, or the entire year leading up to November 22nd. You're trying to convince me that they have never seen a bullet wound before and that they have never seen a shot to anybody's head before. And then we're not talking about the bootleg photo, if it's authentic, of the top of JFK's head with the waterfall of hair and brain matter hanging straight down from the back of his head, or the fact that I've got the cerebellum in my
Cerebellum.
hand. Right. Um, what really really stretches credulity in the doctor discussion is the idea that you have to buy into, that the Parkland doctors didn't know what they were talking about, and that years later, when they describe the wound and demonstrate with their hand with zero ambiguity of the head wound being back in this area, then you have to also this. So you're going to do that, but then you're also then forced to say that Humes and Boswell and Fink to a lesser extent are not actual forensic pathologists. You have to ask the question, why were they there? And we can get into the autopsy in a minute. But if you got to throw the Parkland doctors out with the bathwater, then you got to throw the so-called autopsy doctors out with them. And see, it kind of just falls apart right there because you're going to believe the medical evidence that you want to believe. And if you say that 25 doctors, as we did way back at the beginning of this, we acknowledge to each other that people as humans remember things incorrectly or inaccurately or way off base, and then you're going to impugn that on the Parkland doctors, then you must also impugn it on the autopsy doctors, which suddenly throws into question the three different conclusions that the autopsy doctors arrived at over the course of the weekend. And that's within the context of the autopsy. So that remains my issue with the common clapback that implying that the Parkland doctors didn't know what they were talking about. That's a hill I would die on. If the photo of the back of JFK's head showing what it shows, if that's real, how do you explain it? And if it's forged, why would it be forged?
Are those questions to me? I think
Yeah,
so.
rhetorically.
You're talking about the waterfall bootleg photo. I think I know
Yes.
which one you're talking about. I don't know
Yeah.
if Matt has it, but to look at. But I,
Are you talking about the top of the head or the right side of the head?
he's
So
laying. It's from the back, looking at. He's
yeah,
looking down towards his feet. You don't
correct.
see his body. You just see his head, right?
Correct.
I actually think that photograph can explain why the Parkland doctors said what they said. And I don't know if this is the case, but I think the Ida Docs photo and why the gloved hand is there is it's holding a piece of the skull in place to show where that bullet hole was. Don't quote me on that. There's somebody might be squirming in their seat and say that's totally wrong. But I think they're holding the part of the skull in place. So if you let the piece of the skull go, and that skull has become more fragile than it was right at 314, for example. then it looks like it's water falling, and it does look like maybe that there is a wound that's behind the ear. That's an easy way for them to for us to explain why the medical personnel say what they said, because they did see a gaping wound behind the ear. But if you put the skull back in place, which is what you would have to do to ask where was the entrance, and that's why the eye docs photo shows what it shows. Though that sort of resolves that harmonizes both, that harmonizes the paradox, I guess, is what I would say. But the other quick response I would say is, I'm not saying, and I don't think the conspiracy theory or the Oswald onlyists, at least the what I would say are the credible ones, are saying this. I'm not saying that the Parkland doctors or the Parkland medical personnel are complete fools and they're just totally out to lunch on what their observations were. I honestly think that they're all in good faith saying what they saw. But you have to harmonize what they say they saw and recognize that that they were, imperfect humans in a frantic, traumatic environment, not focused on forensic analysis with the physical evidence, and you have to make both of them meet without creating ridiculous stories like everything's forged. And so when we just focus on Parkland medical personnel saying the back of the head wound is what it is, it doesn't harmonize things. That's the biggest problem. And I'm trying to say, I think the Oswald onlyist view of the matter, at least mine and others probably too, harmonizes things.
And so that's a fundamental for me, because I think that Oswald onlyists are looking for harmony. I think I
Isn't that what
think
we need to do? I
that's
don't think.
philosophical. That's philosophical now, because I'm okay uh currently at this present moment in my time, and I've been doing this for 3 years. I'm currently okay with the current state of the case, which to me is unresolved. And so I feel no sense of urgency to resolve it. And philosophically, I question why Oswald onlyists feel this urgency. That's a premise of a different debate. Uh, but so I don't need things wrapped up in a neat little bow, and I feel like Oswald onlyists are always doing that. But with regard to, again, the head wound, why do two different photos exist? Another way that you could describe the Adidas photo is that, why are they choosing to take this photo this way? Well, we need to show the entry wound in the back of the head. But is it possible? Is it just possible, as some have posited, that what's happening there in that picture is they're actually, and you sort of kind of alluded to it at least, I was surprised a little, but I think they're actually pulling up the scalp and holding the back of the head in place. And I'm not alone. That's not as that I'm not singular in that view. I think that that's one of the reasons why the Ida Docs photo is questionable is because first you have this picture of what looks like a fully intact JFK head, and then you have this picture that looks like a waterfall. So what happened there between those two? Now,
Isn't
yeah,
what I said was harmonizing that? Tell me where I'm wrong, I guess. If the skull is loose and it falls down and more of the brain is exposed, and then you put the skull back in place to show where the bullet hole was, isn't that explain it?
maybe it does, but then you have to question why the Ida Docs is why that's the most widely circulated image. And you know, I'm going to freely admit that I'm a fan of Doug Horn, and I part ways with him a little bit, but I'm willing to, because Doug Horn was there as part of the ARRB when he says that there's some problems with the autopsy photos currently in the archives. There's some crap missing from the inventory, and Cyril Wecht said that years ago. Doug Horn gets super specific when he says that the autopsy photos that we see today in the archives uh, are on, for one thing, they're not original; they're on copy film, and for another thing, three or four of them are missing. And then when you hold them up and show them to the guys who actually shoot the x-rays is what I'm talking about. They're like, yeah, this isn't right. This isn't the picture that I took. There's a lot to be talked about. And again, I'm not a doctor uh, with autopsy photos, but I think that you either have to accept that there's no way that the Warren Commission, the Navy doctors in charge, the Secret Service, the FBI, and all of the, and there's no way that any of those people would have any motivation to steer the narrative in one direction or another. We already know that there's motive. So you have to question the authenticity of the autopsy evidence, and you have to ask, where did JFK's brain go? I want to be clear about this. The Earth is round. We landed on the moon.
I agree. Yes.
Aliens are not walking among us, et cetera, et cetera. This is why I have a problem with, the label conspiracy theorists. I understand that we're cultured in at this point. I understand that usage determines meaning, and that's why we have conspiracy theorists and we have lone nuts. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist. However, I think that there's some credible evidence shown by others, not me, that suggests strongly that there are some problems with the autopsy in the first place, and then the evidence that remains from the autopsy that are in the National Archives today. And this, by the way, is why we had a congressional hearing in March, where there were two, and I think Doug Horn was at the second one. He's the one that got on the national stage and said, the autopsy photos in the National Archives today are not correct, and there are things missing from that. Now that's the guy
Well,
from
I think it's one thing to say there's things missing. That may be true. But it's another thing to say that what we have is fake, false, forged, or wrong. That is a massive claim that deserves strong evidence. And at least what are the arguments that, I mean, let's just take the one we've been referencing. We could probably do this with a bunch of them. The Ida Docs drawing that we've talked about that shows the bullet hole in the back, that was based on an actual photograph that I think now the real one is out there. And we now know that Ida Docs wasn't some part of the conspiracy or the cover up. She just was literally drawing what she saw.
from the
And
picture, from the picture.
so okay, from the picture. And so the question then is, even if she's an innocent actor, was the picture forged? And what I'm saying is the people who were supposed to be independent, I think if we just look at the HSCA, they had access, correct me if I'm wrong, to the actual original autopsy photographs. And there may be some missing, but the ones that they saw, they all looked at, and they all unanimously, as I understand it, concluded that the photographs were consistent and were clear that the shot was from the rear. And so it's one thing to say they're missing. It's another thing to say the actual photographs that we do have are forged or edited or quote photoshopped, which it wouldn't have been photoshopped. It would have been the analog version of that, whatever that would have been. That's a massive claim that I don't think withstands any level of scrutiny. But tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think it sounds nice in the abstract, but when you look at it, I don't think it holds up.
It's I'm nowhere deft enough to rattle everything off from the top of my head, but I will say they address it the very book that you have behind you on your bookshelf.
Chokeholds?
Chokeholds.
There you go.
Right. And so that book, if anybody watches this and wonders, that book is authored by several people, but they get into the medical evidence in there as well. I think there's enough room for debate that people took time to write a large portion of this book demonstrating their thoughts and the evidence that they thought was important, at least. So I would simply encourage everybody to check that book out because I think it's done very well by some of the people who I'm at least, if not, if I don't know them personally, I'm at least adjacent to them. Uh, and I was a little surprised to see that you had it. I'm glad to see that you had it.
We have an hour left to go. So, do you want to take, are you guys finished with that topic or do you want to take 30 seconds to wrap it up or what?
Oh, I'm
I
free
guess
flowing.
yeah, are we still on the head wound? Yeah, I'll just
Very quick,
restate.
very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, head wound. We didn't really talk back and to the left. Yeah, back and to the left. To the casual observer and those who saw it first with when Geraldo published it uh, are fine to or are maybe even right to say, that's odd, but it doesn't mean what the casual observer thinks it means. First of all, you know, human bodies don't react the way we think they do when they're hit by bullets in Hollywood. Um, you know, but I did do a little. I posted a clip of MythBusters. They didn't test the JFK assassination, but they did test the myth of what bodies do when hit with bullets. And they shot a dummy basically at point blank range with a 50 caliber rifle to see how that body's going to react when hit with a 50 caliber round. And it didn't hardly move at all. And so the bullet striking Kennedy, if it were to come from the front right, doesn't have to throw him violently back into the left. I know this is not earth-shattering news. I think the headshot was from the rear, and the back into the left movement was a combination of the jet effect, the neuromuscular reaction, both of which have been tested and replicated. We can debate. I know there's debate about that, but in my view, they've been tested and replicated. Um, his head does move slightly forward. I think it's at frame 312. His head objectively moves slightly forward. So when you have the mass of the head versus the small bullet, that's what's going to happen. And so the back and to the left is just a flat out red herring that can be explained through other means consistent with a rear shot. So I think I've maybe hit the high Oswald onlyest points of a rear head wound, nothing front right.
All right, Skip, could you respond to that and then we'll move on to the next topic?
Yeah, the Zapruder film is a Rorschach test in which you see what you want to see. And what baffles me constantly is that Oswald onlyists basically have to stay in Dealey Plaza. Um, and the reason why it's hard to get out of Dealey Plaza is because there's so much to talk about just within Dealey Plaza, right? And so we get into the weeds about what the Zapruder film shows or doesn't show. As I said before, the Zapruder film shows a scary amount of people that the driver shot him, and that's why his head goes back into the left. So I think that just to summarize, I think the
Or the Secret Service. Don't forget them.
right. Yeah. No, see, man, you get into George Hickey in the next film. Uh, so bottom line is, I think the Oswald onlyists have their work cut out for them to convince an overwhelming majority of people that what they're seeing with their own eyes is not really what's happening. So, and we can end it right there because we could go on.
I think you're going to get crucified a little bit if you don't mention the back into respond to that. Do you want to take 10 seconds to respond to that?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
I'm currently on Kennedy. Kennedy's head was hit from both the front and the rear. That's what I'm currently on.
I got you.
Lee Bowers was probably in the best position to see the goings on of who it would have been firing the shot behind the stockade fence. He was very vague, if I understand his testimony correctly, about what was going on, if anything. His initial testimony was quite vague, and then I think after he talked to Mark Lane, he got a little more clear. But even then, it was like, yeah, there was something going on. There was a flash of light or something. I'm not sure. If he was paying attention there, I mean, it seems he would have seen this. If we just go with the guy, the assassin who Josiah Thompson or whoever thinks they see next to the tree, who then moved from the Mormon photo. Seems like Lee Bowers would have saw that person. Was this person, one thing I want to, when I go back there, I'm going to stand and you guys will know, or maybe Matt already can say, can I get a rifle and point down? If I'm 6 feet tall, can I X and be enough up over the fence where my arms aren't weird? Do I have to have a handgun? Lee Bowers would have saw all that. Why wasn't he more clear? And it seems somebody would have saw something. And the puff of smoke is totally red herring in my view. Anyway, those are
Yep.
questions I have.
Right, and my question is going to sound repetitive, but why? Uh, I suppose that if you question what Lee Bauer says, then you likewise question what Sam Holland and his three buddies said about what they saw standing on top of the overpass. And so that just leads to a general question of how is it that so many, and you kind of answered this at the very beginning, how is it that so many eyewitnesses just didn't really see what they said they saw? And again, I think you have a tough job ahead of you. And you represent about a third of the population, and I think you have a tough time
Sadly.
convincing the other two-thirds of the population. And with that, we can move on. Man, we could do this all night. I'm having a good
Oh,
time.
we
Just so
have
I'm clear.
okay, so the next topic is the Walker shooting, something that's very overlooked. And I believe one of you guys mentioned it earlier. Who was it? Was it Skip? You
Might
mentioned
have been Skip.
I have not talked a lot about the
We
Walker
haven't gone
shooting.
into detail, but I think Skip may have mentioned it in passing. Or
so.
me, I can't remember.
So what do you guys think about the Walker shooting? Who do you guys think of that?
I mean, I think again, this is not going to be earth-shattering. That is a key event, and this gets to a broader point that I think a lot of conspiracy theorists overlook, which is understanding Oswald. Um, we will never know this with any degree of certainty, but if we polled just the serious, or relatively serious conspiracy theorists, how many of them have read Marina and Lee? I would say it's probably less than 50%. And then beyond that, how many have read Oswald's Tale, I think by Mailer, probably less than even Marina and Lee. How many have even read Case Closed, which really hones in on Oswald, who he was in his history? He is critical to understanding the whole case, but especially the Walker shooting, because he equated him to Hitler and said, look, if someone could have stopped, who could have killed Hitler and would have stopped the Holocaust, among many other things, somebody should have done it. He viewed Walker, who was a very prominent right-wing anti-communist, sort of John Bircher, firebrand. Oswald erroneously, I think, equated him with Hitler and said, "Hey, look, someone's got to take this guy out." He does some reconnaissance on Walker's house. There's photographs. I think the only way conspiracy theorists get around that is they say, "Oh well, that's Ruth Payne just planting evidence." Did the photographs exist or not? Were they taken with Oswald's camera or not? They existed. They were taken with his. They were taken with his camera. They were taken of where the shots were fired from. They showed the escape route. Marina confirmed that Oswald told her he did it, that he tried to do it. I think Marina's testimony is crucial here as well. And then someone might say, well, he can hit a moving target. from the sixth floor, but he can't hit a stationary target. I think that's a non-issue. It gets deflected by the window. And interestingly, the little video of Walker in his study saying, "What happened is I had it sitting here and it shot over my head." What does the bullet look like in the wall? It's an elongated, tumbling Carcano round. Look, if you look at that bullet in the wall, that's just a side note. So I think, and Oswald even gets back and he's sort of fuming. If you read Marina and Lee, he's fuming over the next day or so, or after, about how could he have missed? He didn't know. He thought he hit him until the next day. He realized, or he listens and hears on the news that Walker lived, and he's fuming. How could I have missed and whatever? And anyway, I think the conspiracy theorists just have to sit and try to poke holes in all that, and create all kinds of suspicion, which is what they classically do. And it just, all their little holes they try to poke don't hold up to explain the totality of the evidence, at least as it is to Walker. So that's how I view it.
Okay, how I view it is, I'm not an in-depth student on the Walker incident, but I do know and can say with certainty that Oswald is not a suspect in that case until after Oswald himself has been assassinated, right?
Nor was anyone
So
else.
it really helps. It really helps if we can tie him to the Walker shooting. Okay, so I can concede that the picture exists and that it was Oswald's camera. You still haven't. I don't think anybody is able to say that they saw Oswald take the picture. Same way, nobody actually saw Oswald in the sixth floor window. Okay, so it's
Close.
if you're gonna believe in a conspiracy, then you're gonna believe that you could retroactively plant evidence that supported your theory. But the most stunning thing to me, Josh already talked, he already mentioned it. So I'm just reiterating that where Oswald onlyists strain credulity is the idea uh, that Oswald was a Marine sharpshooter who clearly shot 212, 2 points above what he needed to be, like whatever the intermediate range um, of sharpshooter was, uh, with perhaps the shittiest rifle uh, in possible inventory. But when he goes to shoot a stationary target, he misses. Okay, yeah, we're going to poke
We don't
holes
know if
in.
he missed. It hit the window. Is that in line with where Walker was? We don't know.
I'll just say this: if there are holes that can be punched in this idea, they should be punched, and they are still being punched today. If the case against Oswald in the Walker incident was as rock solid as all that, we wouldn't be talking about it. Yeah, Oswald took a pot shot at Walker because he disliked Walker, as everyone should have, because he was a flaming white supremacist, John Bircher society, like far right wing thing. Uh, but if you're going to say that Oswald took a shot at Walker because he was ideologically opposed to Walker, then you got a problem as to why he takes a shot at Kennedy, who's on the other side of the other side of the aisle, politically speaking, anyway. Like that doesn't make sense. I'm going to take out this John Birch guy as a practice for taking out this progressive guy. Is that what you'd have us believe? So
I
there
don't
are
think that's
holes in
the
the.
claim, but
Okay,
uh,
but you could say that ideologically speaking, the two don't line up.
that's true. That's true. But that's not. Oswald didn't shoot at Kennedy for ideological reasons, per se. In other words, for Kennedy himself, I guess is what I'm saying. He didn't hate. In fact, I think there's evidence that he, uh, as a person, liked Kennedy, which is a paradox. There's no doubt about that. It's a paradox. But um, I think
A
he,
paradox. Paradoxes are tough, man, when they poke holes in the premise that Oswald had any motive at all to shoot Kennedy.
he he was committed to this notion, at least I think some have said, and again, I don't know if this comes straight from Marina Lee or other, whether it's Norman Mailer or Case Closed, and those aren't certainly the only ones that ever go on explanations of Oswald. The idea of uh, assassinating or killing in the name of principle or politics or whatever. And so he wasn't shooting Kennedy for Kennedy's sake. He was shooting Kennedy for what Kennedy stood for. Again, I'm not breaking new ground. This is my understanding, I think, of at least the argument. He was the leader of this uh, nation that had a lot of things that Oswald was fundamentally opposed to, and the opportunity presented itself. Um, I, just as a side note, I mentioned this on one of my TikToks, but this was a revelation to me. And when I read Marina and Lee, he did for a fleeting moment, at least according to Marina or Priscilla Johnson's retelling of what Marina said, I will grant you that, uh, have thoughts to go take out Nixon when Nixon was coming to town before Nixon was Nixon, before he was president or whatever. And Marina kind of put a stop, locked him in the bathroom even, and Oswald sort of came hat in hand and said, "Okay, I'm actually not going to do it." But the idea that he was committed to what I would phrase political assassination is not the best term, I don't think, but it was that idea. That's the notion. But the other side note that I would give that I forgot to mention is I think the letter that Oswald writes to Marina, I think that's authentic. I think it's telling. I think it's in his handwriting. It's very telling of that he was going to go do what he did to Walker. He thought he was going to get caught. He was giving Marina instructions, and he did something similar, not the same, but similar, the night of the 21st of November. He leaves his wedding ring. He kind of follows the same pattern that he did in the Walker shooting. That's also, I think, some consistency in terms of how he's operating with the two shootings.
I'll just respond to that and say, I would not, I cannot see how uh, Oswald Onlyus hold up Marina as a credible witness against all the other witnesses that they deem not credible. When Marina is the one, still, I think she's still alive, and said as recently as the 80s or 90s that she firmly believed that Oswald was innocent, and that's in
Well,
spite
that's
of.
easy to explain, but and
Okay,
you've heard the response, but I think that's easy to explain.
I think you've got a, I think you have a big job in front of you convincing the other two-thirds of the population that Marina does not think Oswald shot Kennedy and use the Walker incident as evidence that Oswald shot at Kennedy. I'll
That's what she
grant
thinks
you.
now. That's not what she thought initially for years. Not only when she spent in very intimate time with Priscilla Johnson, but early
You're,
on, she
but
was not saying that.
but you would also. I'm just. I'm a, somewhat aghast though at the statute of limitations on people's memory, because you can say that the Parkland doctors are today those that are still alive, and it's only one or two. That in present decade 2013, whenever that movie was shot, that what the Parkland doctors saw was what they remembered now is any different from what they remembered then. Like their stories didn't change. But
Well, some of them admit they were wrong. Some now admit they were wrong.
I'll just throw this out there also in addition to this, and this will blow your mind. And I, once again,
No pun
I
intended.
immediately regret the choice of words. Uh, I get that all the time, by the way. People think that they're being cute. Um, so if you're an agent provocateur, which is what I think Oswald was, uh, then you have to question any physical evidence left behind or anything that he does with seemingly one intention juxtaposed. So uh, writing a note to Marina giving her instructions of what to do because he thought he wasn't going to come back from the Walker shooting. That's compelling as a story. But he did come back. What did he think? He was
Because
going to be arrested right
he's
on
going
the
to get
spot?
caught.
Uh, Here's what I'll say as far as his ideological positions. Again, agent provocateur. When people ask me about the backyard photos, which I lean towards the backyard photos are real. And I lean towards the backyard photos. You know, some people talk about them being forged. I went back and forth on the backyard photos. I think uh, forged isn't the right word, and I think staged is the correct word.
All
By
right.
him or
Yes,
staged by him?
by him,
Do you think
perhaps.
Marina took him?
Yeah, I think she
Do you
was
think
there.
those, do you think the gun, do you think the Mannlicher Carcano in that photo was the photo that was the gun found on the sixth floor?
Not sure.
What about
Uh,
the pistol?
Not sure. Maybe, perhaps.
And what evidence is there that other than assumption or conjecture that Oswald was a provocateur, agent provocateur?
He's holding two newspapers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying besides the photograph, what evidence is there that's
It
what
starts with
his job was?
it starts with the newspapers. This is my current theory. It starts with the two papers he's holding up. Quick, look up what they were.
Well, it's the I this is yeah, there you go. This
Okay,
is the JFK.
I'll just tell you it, for those watching. It's the
The
militant
worker
and the
and the
militant.
militant. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Okay, these two newspapers ideologically opposed to each other. There would be no single person that read both the militant and the worker. It doesn't make sense. Maybe you could say, well, he just likes to subscribe to things. Certainly he did. So he's like, oh, okay, I'm going to subscribe to the militant and see what those people are saying. And these are far left politics, by the way. Uh, and I'm also going to subscribe to the worker to see what they have to say. But a single person ideologically would not necessarily be subscribing to both, but subscribing to both makes sense if you want to see both sides. But then why does he choose that prop in that picture? And I submit to you, it is to show somebody at least that he was, that he's a provocateur, that he's in the program. He's been
Yeah,
properly sheep dipped.
So
I
you guys
I don't
agree?
know.
So you
Yeah.
do agree that the backyard photos are authentic? Well, that saves us some time. We got
I think I
we
think that's
agree.
I think that's a score for the Oswald onlyists. Skip will disagree, but I think I'll take that.
We agree. Okay, so the next topic is Oswald's the shooting of Oswald. Um, I've never debated that subject, so I have no idea where that topic is even going to start, go, or end. So the shooting of
I,
Oswald.
I want to be
Yeah.
Mhm.
absolutely clear, no ambiguity. Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay, next
Yes.
topic. Next topic. But
Yeah.
there are people in last 5 years who have said that that's not Ruby shooting Oswald, and I was like, that's not.
I'm
No,
not
I
surprised at
know.
that.
no, that,
There's a
yeah.
video where they point out how they threw a bag over his head, and it's like, oh, that's to cover up. Ruby was already like in the back room, but like whoever shot Ruby, they put a bag over his head. And I'm like, well, just because they put a bag over his head to sequester him off does not mean that it's a different person. You know
No,
what
no, those are the
Yeah.
real conspiracy theorists,
I mean?
man.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'll take a shot.
Okay.
So, I think uh, Ruby's shooting of Oswald is explained by Ruby, uh, and not his mafia connections. Um, He was impulsive. Multiple witnesses who knew him well said he was impulsive. I forget the guy, a close friend of his, said, after Ruby shoots Oswald and when Ruby's in custody the day or so, or let's say it's within a week, but I think it's within a day or so after, he calls this friend of his, Ruby does, and says, "I've got some balls, don't I?" Something of that sort. I don't know if that's a direct quote, but like I'm a gutsy guy. Like I took out the guy, I avenged the Kennedy's killer, and it was an impulsive thing. I think the Western Union money order, literally 4 minutes before, illustrates the impulsive nature of it. He didn't go down there to even see Oswald or go into the police department, let alone shoot Oswald. But he's around the police department enough that he walks down, he slips in. I think he went down the ramp. I think there's another argument that he went in the side door or something. I want to go there, but maybe Matt can show me around. I think he goes down the ramp, and lo and behold, he's there right at the time. I mean, to think otherwise, there has to be someone in the Dallas police, a mole of some sort, who tells Ruby that the planned time to transfer Oswald is now different, and Oswald needs to be there at a certain time, and Ruby needs to be there at a certain time, and Ruby, instead of making sure that he's there right at the moment, stops to run an errand and send money to one of his dancers with his beloved dog in the car. And I do think Ruby's sort of deathbed confession or statement that, if he would have just taken a U-turn at a different spot, this wouldn't have even happened to him because he wouldn't have even been in the spot. All of that smacks of impulsive action, not planned. He was not a hitman or coerced. Not, a lot of people say he wasn't hired. That's not how the mob works. Okay, fine. He wasn't coerced or forced by the mob. He loved Kennedy. There were a lot of people who hated Oswald. Ruby, because of this, there were a lot of people who wanted Oswald dead. And dang it, Ruby was going to be the one to step up and do the deed. And it's as simple as that. I mean, that's really it.
I don't think it's as simple as that. On the other hand, I'm unresolved about Ruby. I lean towards he thought that he wasn't. I lean towards he was coerced or bribed or ordered to do it, regardless of the circumstances, because he was impulsive. Um, I'm willing to concede that. I'm also willing to concede his beloved pet being in the car. Um, what I'm not willing to concede is Ruby. Now, granted, he spent a lot of time around the police station, and he really cherished his proximity to law enforcement and power, and used it to his advantage. And he was constantly priming the pump, as they say, with his business cards and promises of free drinks to police officers after hours in his club and all of that. Seems shady, from a just sort of a civilian's point of view, not a non-researcher's point of view. You look at Ruby and you say, well, that's super suspicious, right? Uh, Also, adding weight to the incredible events of the weekend, President of the United States shot in broad daylight, uh, sort of at the very deserted end of the entire downtown, in the middle of this motorcade. And then we barely recover from that. But then the accused assassin is himself in turn assassinated. And holy cow, that's weird. And that's really where everybody starts on the case, right? Like, that's the first thing that you look at that says, this ain't, something's up. This doesn't check out. Because if Ruby was Ruby in his right mind would have at least wanted to see Oswald, I think, tried and convicted and brought to justice the standard way. Now, I cannot get away from the fact that Ruby is not only stalking Oswald at DPD as soon as he's there, like Friday night, all the way through, all the way all through Saturday. But he shows up at Parkland Hospital and speaks to that reporter guy whose name I can't pull at the moment.
Jeff
Like
Cantor.
Ruby, yeah, Cantor. Why is he at Parkland Hospital? Why is he like white
Ruby's
on
a guy who
rice?
likes to be in the mix. Like that's just kind of who
I
he was.
grant you that point, with no issues. But this makes the whole thing even weirder. And then I also cannot escape the piece of film in which Ruby, for reasons unknown to me, is given a platform to speak on film and basically say the world will never know. And I'm paraphrasing all the events that transpired me to put me in the situation that I'm in. That's a bunch of double speak,
That's
perhaps,
Rorschach also.
to make you think that he's more than he is. But I don't think you can simply throw that out with the bathwater and say, well, Ruby acted alone. For me, that topic, I'm, I lean towards his extensive long distance phone record the day before to a lot of Chicago, numbers, and his background of shady at best dealings with mafia figures and his gun running, history to New Orleans. Ruby's a bad guy. Okay, let's be clear. He ain't all innocent. I think he's a shady character. So of course, uh, he is suspect unless you're the Warren Commission and you need the public to believe that Ruby acted alone and Oswald acted alone. Then you shift the narrative that way. So that's all I got really on Ruby.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Ruby's. I mean, look, not very many mothers of the world or parents of the world are gonna be happy when they hear their daughter is marrying the owner of a strip club. I mean, you don't even have to be sort of whatever. He's not like the most upstanding guy in the general sense of what parents might be happy who their daughter brings home. But he's a human, has flaws, has probably redeeming qualities as well, just like any other. But he was just he was a he had a temper, he was impulsive, and he just acted in accordance with that. I mean, the if you take all the rabbit holes to their logical end, you have to say, okay, he had a bunch of long distance phone calls to Chicago or wherever the day before. So that means what? Does that mean that the mob wanted to make sure Oswald was taken out? Why? Well, because the mob had something to do with Oswald and they needed to take him out. That creates a whole host of questions that are in my opinion absurd, that can't be resolved and that aren't defensible. And that's where, and just this one example among many others, the conspiracy theorists don't have to defend their questions and the implications of those questions because they can't craft a cohesive narrative that stands up. So they just get to ask a bunch of these questions and poke holes in the narrative and leave a bunch of what ifs and fill them in with suspicion. That's just a fundamental problem at a many turns, and it just manifests again here with Ruby.
All right, that we got through our five topics. We are going to segue into the round table type discussion with our first topic is, and again, this is just completely back and forth. All right, this is the conversation round table part. Why do people agree or disagree?
I mean, I think that this is just the most. I don't think this is an exaggeration, though it sounds like it. It's the most scrutinized crime probably ever in history. Certainly in the United States, in the history of the United States, every fact is disputed. Um, there are coincidences, there are anomalies. eyewitness testimony is rampant in this, which is inherently unreliable, which just creates fertile ground to be filled in with suspicion. And if you look hard enough and close enough at anything, especially something like this, you will find something. And um, it, it, it also, the other part that sort of overarches all that is it is a perfect uh, um, scenario for people to bring their worldview to bear on all these questions. And then their worldview answers the questions by and large. And the way I think you get at and so as long as people have different worldviews, they're going to have different opinions on the Kennedy assassination, which means it'll always be this way. But I think the way you get at, and this is part of what the basis of my reason and reality uh, moniker is, the way you think you get at reality better is you try to say, hold on, what is my worldview, first of all? How is my worldview or my biases impacting how I think about these questions? And you step back and you say, can I step aside my world, set my worldview aside, set my biases aside, and try to look at this without letting those things taint or influence my conclusions? The more you can do that, which is very difficult for humans to do, myself included, it's very difficult for humans to do that. The more you can do that, the closer you're going to get to what's real, what's reality, what's true. And
Oh,
because humans are humans, that's why we disagree, because we can't do that.
all right, Skip. Why do
Uh,
people agree or disagree?
well, so I think probably Josh and I are not too far apart, perhaps, because I appreciated what he said about people's view of the case is going to be, if this is what you were saying, Josh, and correct me, that you do bring your worldview, that your worldview informs how you look at the case. And I think that's what Josh, I'm paraphrasing, I think that's the point he was making, and I agree with
Yep.
it. Okay. Absolutely, that's the case. Now, I have said previously on my channel, I have said, um, I have compared the JFK case to matters of faith, and regardless of what your position of on faith is, uh, that what it is not as important to me as the idea that there are uh, that in the Oswald Onlyist camp there are things that are taken as a matter of faith, and that they're not objective. That in fact it becomes a dogma, uh, and so I'm a fan of Dan McClellan. You should look him up on YouTube if you haven't seen him already. So he talks all the time about data over dogma, um, and I think that Josh represents well um, an effort to clear the air uh, and solve the case by looking at the hard evidence, albeit the evidence stuck in the limo in the middle of Dealey Plaza, and that that alone is all we need to look at. Um, and so, one thing again, not picking on Josh, but I've heard him use this phrase, and I've heard other people use it. So it's not he is not singular in this, but the totality of the evidence is, I think, I think we define it differently. Because to me, the totality of the evidence would be being open to the possibility that other things could be true than what the totality of the physical and ballistic evidence tells you, your interpretation of it. But either way, you have to accept the largest portion of the Warren Report um, as a sacred tome, like some would the Bible, and say, and I'm not saying that you're saying this. I'm saying that uh,
You
some
can use
low.
me as a caricature. That's fine. I don't care. I have very thick skin, by the way. So
Well,
don't worry about me.
I like to think that I do too, and I mean, again, the totality of the comments on a given day have led me to not take things too seriously or myself too seriously. I think that lone nutters um, have to hold the Warren Commission as the sacred text and Posner and Bugliosi as the apostles of the gospel of the Warren Commission. And I think that the Warren Commission starts with a bad motive. And so when you, I think what forms the whole idea of pinning it on Oswald, that that Oswald needs to be tried and convicted in the court of public opinion so that all of us have closure and that world wars can be prevented. All right. So that's going to be Johnson's angle, right? Um, that these guys didn't want to be on the Warren Commission in the first place. Johnson really, you know, put his foot down on them and said, you're going to be on it. And not only that, but you got to convince the public that it was only Oswald. When you're starting from that premise, you have to not look at the totality of the evidence and you have to look at the final report and say, yeah, here it is. There's no contradictions. The Warren Report is infallible. I don't think Josh is saying that the Warren Report is infallible. I'm saying a
Definitely
lot
not.
of lone nutters do, and that is a question of faith and not data.
That brings us to the next thing on the list, which says, what are the respective criticisms of the motives of either conspiracy theorists or Oswald onlyists?
Here's the reason I put that on the list, so that I could acknowledge in person to at least one person, the only person, by the way, who is making videos actively for the lone nut side. Okay, I want to say that conspiracy theorists, those on the conspiracy theory or CT side of things, uh, we absolutely refuse to accept that a beloved, young, energetic, idealistic, beautiful, beautiful family, the next great hope of the 60s. Uh, and the youth of America is suddenly engaged in politics and happy to see that there's a new generation and the old guys are out and JFK and beautiful Jackie and Camelot. How, please tell me how this man could be cut down in broad daylight by a crazy person who didn't amount to anything. Oswald was a loser. He had a horrible family. He had a horrible childhood, family life, and all that. And that caused him to shoot Kennedy for no good reason, and then also get him shot himself. But that's really just an aside and doesn't have anything to do with anything. That that's what the conspiracy theorists think. We can't accept it. And lone nutters, um, they're coming from the listen, I don't understand why we've been discussing this for 62 years. The case was closed when Posner wrote his book. And then Bugliosi, if you don't like Posner, read Bugliosi. And we haven't even talked about Bugliosi's criticism of Posner. And that's a whole other level of crazy. But so basically, lone nutters would like you to know that they've solved the case and they have all the answers. And if you'll just listen to them, then they can easily explain what you clearly aren't understanding by what you're able to see in the Zapruder film or any of the pictures, especially when Connolly's, jacket lapel flips out. Like, uh, so I'm just acknowledging that on the conspiracy side, I know what the lone nutters, how I'm overly depicting, I'm dramatically depicting um, the case against conspiracy theories. We can't accept reality, and on the lone nutter side, it's obvious that the case is solved if you'll just look at it. Now, Josh may have a different interpretation of that, which I'd love
Well,
to hear.
I no, I think it's funny we're talking about motives, respective criticisms of the motives of both sides. This is a little anecdote. I thought this was funny because um, I think I will grant you this that a lot of Oswald onlyists like to sit on their high horse and look down their noses at conspiracy theorists. Granted, probably happens on the other side too. And the example of that is there was a comment, I don't know if it was on your page or mine, where, or actually, it probably was on Facebook, where somebody who was a conspiracy theorist said, I can't believe that anybody would think that Oswald acted alone. For anyone to think that, they must think that the earth is flat. And I often hear it the other way around. Like anyone who believes in a conspiracy thinks that the earth is flat also. It's the same level of thinking. So it's funny. Both sides view each other in the same way. I generally think that most people have good faith motives. They arrive at their conclusions genuinely, but with their worldview firmly intact, and not necessarily following the data like Dan McClellan advocates. And so we just like to poke at the other point at the other person and say, I can't believe how ridiculous they are. The three of us probably are all guilty of that ourselves. And TikTok, as I'm trying to learn, is unfortunately premised around baiting people. So you kind of have to be a provocateur of your own, even though I personally don't, I'm a little more nuanced, or gray on a lot of things, especially outside of the JFK assassination. Um, but you kind of have to not do that when you're a TikToker. I think in some respects, I'm trying to learn from Skip. So we just like to. This is a human thing again. We like to look at somebody else and say, I can't believe how wrong and how stupid that person is, and we don't do the same for ourselves. And the more we're able to ask ourselves, where am I wrong? How am I wrong? What am I missing? How can I set aside my worldview? The better we will be at coming to correct conclusions about JFK or anything else for that matter. And we will see our opponents, quote unquote, or the opposite side of JFK with a little more sympathy. I don't know. I think you go to these JFK forums or even some of the people that Matt have debated, man, people get fired up and how stupid the other side is and whatever. And it's like it's really not that it's really not that necessary to hold different opinions. We should have discussions and conversations and drill down to the nth degree. I'm all for that. But like, we should be able to, as Ben Sass wrote in one of a book that he wrote about, it's called Them, this idea of the hometown gym on a Friday night feeling. Like we should be able to see each other on the street at the hometown gym, or even in a discussion like this and be respectful and have polar opposite opinions, but that's just not the world we live in, and therefore we're going to impugn each other's motives, unfortunately. That's just the world we are in because of social media and politics and the nonstop cable news channels and the president we have or whatever. Um, if we can get around that, we should, but I don't know that we're going to get there anytime soon.
Yeah, I think where I was coming from on that, um, first of all, to I if I was talking to a group of lone nutters, Oswald onlyists, I think is a friendlier term. Uh, I want them to
I'll accept
understand.
low nutters.
I would want the other side to understand that I get where you're coming from, and I understand where you think I'm coming from and how we're all kind of positioned in our relative views. But I definitely avoid getting rude when I'm hosting a live on TikTok or just in any of my videos. So I hope that I don't say derogatory things I hope that I haven't in the past and will continue to try not to and pledge to not to in the future. And this is one of the reasons why uh, the discussions that you see in the Facebook groups for me, that's it. It's not attractive. I don't say a lot over there on Facebook. Now will I post a video that is for sure going to draw fire from the lone nutters? Uh, I feel like what I've been doing for 3 years is, and I was going to ask you this question also. I started out as an Oswald onlyist. Okay. And so I have been interested in the case of my whole life. We haven't told each other's backstories yet. Uh, but as a teenager in the late 70s, maybe not a teenager, it was prior to 1980 or thereabouts. My dad actually brought the case to my attention with the typical article that was prevalent even back then and has been for a long time. All the similarities between JFK and Lincoln's assassinations, all the weird coincidences. And I thought, man, that's super weird. But that's 100 years apart. There's no way that's coordinated. So what is it? Is it metaphysical? Is there something that happens to people who are elected in the year that ends in 60 that they're destined to be assassinated under suspicious circumstances? And what's it going to be next time? Is he going to like shoot from the car and then hide in the warehouse? Uh, or you know what I'm talking about. I'm being ridiculous. That's what gets me started in the case. Fast forward to today. I think the movie JFK definitely has a strong impact on me, but not the only impact. I think when I started looking at things, I realized that, hey, wait a second, it's not all as settled as uh, I thought it was back when I was an Oswald onlyist. Wait a second, there's some unanswered questions there. So my point is on TikTok, I think what I'm doing is because you can only hold the TikTok viewer's attention for the first 5 seconds. If you don't make your point in the first 5 seconds or ask the question, then they scroll on. They've lost you. But there's a tremendous amount of people interested in the case. So I don't mind dancing around the edges of the various conspiracy theories, except the ones that are absolutely ridiculous. People try to lock me into my own view of, well, what do you think happened? It's the number one question I get. What do you think happened? There's a playlist. I have a playlist. I have several playlists at the top of my TikTok account, and one of them is called What I Think Happened. I've tried to answer this question several times. The other question I try to answer, and this is the philosophical part, is why does it matter? I know that's on the list of, things that we were going to talk about. And Matt, I don't know how long you want to go.
Well,
Uh,
we only have three more topics left, and we can go through them pretty quickly. I mean, I you want to go to the next thing on the unless Josh, you want to say something or
yeah,
I mean,
if
yeah. Why does it matter? We could go to that if we want to
oh,
go
that's
there.
the very last one. The next thing on the list says, what are the core issues resolved or unresolved?
Yeah,
oh,
I can take that real
All right.
quick. I mean, some of the things we've already talked.
yeah,
I think a big core issue is Oswald, understanding him, and I think you will understand the case much better and why he did what he did. But there's going to be a debate long after we're probably all gone, which is hopefully a long for all three of us in the future. The single bullet that's going to continue and is a core unresolved issue. The headshot, we've already talked about that one. The guns, I mean, you can go down the list. Literally every little thing is disputed, some more than others, and some more deservedly than others. I guess what I would say. everything can't be disputed. There are some things that are more open to genuine dispute. There are some that you're just looking foolish when you try to dispute some things. And I think because uh, no other theory, in my view, no other theory other than Oswald acted alone. Skip already mentioned this, and I guess this will be a response to what he said about the totality of the evidence. When I say the totality of the evidence, I mean you have to look at all the quote bad facts for the Oswald onlyists. I haven't said this, and I don't think I've mentioned it at all on my TikTok, but people can now Google my name. So by profession, I'm a lawyer, and I don't do criminal law. I do construction law of all random things, but I am in court from time to time. And you have to create a cohesive narrative. And the only thing that does that is looking at the bad facts and dealing with the bad facts. A bad lawyer only deals with the good facts and ignores the bad facts. A good lawyer takes the bad facts and says, look, I understand there's evidence that leans against my position, but here's how those can be explained. That's how you have to do it. So I actually am with Skip that you have to look way beyond Dealey Plaza. You have to go down all the rabbit holes and explain why the quote unquote things that look bad for the Oswald onlyists are not a problem. And so what I'm saying when I say totality of the evidence, you have to look at all of it, even though some things are never going to be resolved with anybody's satisfaction. You have to look at all of it and craft the most plausible, cohesive narrative, and that's why I think Oswald acted alone. So anyway, I guess
Take
we're talking
the
core issues.
Yeah,
Core
so
issues. Oh, they're unresolved.
I think there are some core issues uh, that are unresolved that don't center around ballistics and trajectories. And one of those is um, why in the Sam Hill were there 2 million files locked away after the House Select Committee uh, finished their work in what 76 or 77, and then why did the National Archives not follow the law, the JFK Records Act passed directly as a result of the Oliver Stone movie in 1992, uh, and the AARB working, very long and hard for 4.5 years after setting up the plan following the law to release all of the files to the public way ahead of the 30-year schedule. Like, why does here I'm going to reveal some of my worldview, which is why does your government think that your children and can't handle seeing millions, however many millions of pages of files? Like, if Oswald acted alone, then why are there freaking 3, 4, 5 million files? Now, Oswald only is going to say, well, none of that's going to materially change the ballistics, man. And so, uh,
Beyond ballistics, beyond just ballistics, I would say we probably are in mostly agreement on the files. I'm with you 100% that release them all, redactions and all. Like just get them out there, and they should have been out there 30 years ago. I'm
I don't,
absolutely with you on that.
so I don't, but so lone nutters will say there's not a smoking gun, uh,
There
other than
wasn't
the other than the one we
earlier
know
in
about.
2025. Like how many, maybe you know this, Skip or Matt, how many, was it a couple million files? How many were released in the most recent release earlier in 2025?
It's on the National Archives homepage, which I can do a screenshot here later in post. I can put
Okay,
it.
but if you're talking
Yeah,
about the quantity, the total quantity released in back in March,
hundreds of
um,
thousands,
yeah,
millions. How
hundreds.
many was it?
We can agree it was hundreds of thousands, but I'll go on to say that they still haven't completely released everything. They're still withholding things. We have not seen everything we expected to see.
And
So
here's an example of what I think the conspiracy theorists will do, because there wasn't a smoking gun in that last batch, And granted, there are still some not released, and I say release them tomorrow. They should release them all, unredacted, do it all. But what I mark my words, once they're quote unquote all released, conspiracy theorists are going to say, no, they're not all released. They're withholding something. We know we have somebody who says that there's still some that they haven't been found or they were just found and they haven't been released. There's going to be something, not all conspiracy theorists, I will grant you that, but there will be some conspiracy theorists who will always say there's more missing because that's just their worldview. And what I'm saying, and I think you already know this, Skip, is what has already been released hasn't fundamentally changed the conclusion. What's going to be released is not going to fundamentally change the conclusion of the Oswald onlyists.
So, right. But then again, how are we ever going to know? Uh, because we can't trust what's happening at the moment. And not to be political, but I will say that I am at least gratified that Congresswoman Luna, although she's also investigating aliens and UPAs, uh, is dead serious about the JFK thing. And so I'm grateful that they had two hearings, at least. And I think I think when Doug Horn asked for the investigation to be reopened, or Oliver Stone actually, I think is the one that stated firmly the investigations to be reopened. I think Luna takes that seriously. Now I don't know if she's capable of making it
So
happen.
that's funny. I mean, I haven't followed that very closely other than just at a high level. I don't think I saw any Oswald onlyists being called to testify there, which I think is telling. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But I mean, how many more investigations do we need? The HSCA was supposed to be the one to debunk it all, and they basically confirmed. I mean, the fundamental conclusions were confirmed of the Warren Commission were confirmed by the HSCA. Everyone likes to say, "Oh, the HSCA said there was a probable conspiracy." No, this is. I'm not telling you guys anything new, and this is just basic talking points. I get it, but it was the Dictabelt recording that's been debunked. The rest of it, you take that out of the picture, and they basically said, yeah, the Warren Commission got it right, more or less. I'll grant you there's some nuances. And one key thing, this gets back to a previous thing we talked about. The HSCA said the Warren Commission came to their conclusions in good faith. So you now have to say the Warren Commission was a cover up, and the HSCA covered up the Warren Commission's cover up. Or the alternative is, yeah, the Warren Commission wasn't perfect. Yeah, there was some things they should have done better, but they came to their conclusions in good faith. So did the HSCA. And are we going to have another official investigation to rubber stamp a conspiracy? Is that what Luna's looking for? I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't. Here's the thing. I don't think.
Quickly, before Skip responds, really quickly, there was one Oswald onlyist who testified at the second hearing last year, and that was presidential historian Alexis Coe. So
Got it.
just just for structure there. All right, Skip.
Right. I'm going to come down on the side of being a fan of Alexis Coe, but not because of that appearance.
Uh-oh. You're
But
crossing lines.
right. Well, right. Yeah. So to me, at the risk of really being way too hyperbolic, the HSCA, they came to the conclusion with nuances, and the nuances is, well, there probably was a conspiracy, but basically the Warren Commission got it right. To me, is a bunch of foxes in 1977 telling the hens in 1977 that the foxes in 1963 really told the hens all the correct thing. Like, if you can't believe the Warren Commission, how are you going to believe the HSCA? Especially when Angleton is the very CIA liaison with the HSCA, and he lies his ass off, and basically said, "Oh no, we didn't, Angleton. Now he's the guy. He's the guy. In case anybody forgets, that has a 200 pages worth of file on Lee Harvey Oswald sitting on his desk on November 21st, 1963. Okay, Angleton is dirty. So I'm my theory with that is the HSCA is not resolved. It's one of the core issues. Well, uh, the files in general are not resolved, and that the HSCA it can be questioned as much as the Warren, maybe a little less than the Warren Commission. I don't think the HSCA puts anything to rest. I have questions about the dicta belt. I know people think it's been debunked, but I think the jury's still out on that. I don't think that two-thirds of the world has been convinced yet. You got your work cut out for you. But those are a couple of the core
You
issues.
assume two-thirds of the world know the case as well as either of you, or even as well as me, which is less than
I
both of you.
right. I
The
so
vast majority only hear sound bites, and they have their worldview to stamp whatever they hear.
okay, I said another way, the vast majority believes that there was a conspiracy, and it's a minority that believes that Oswald acted alone. So when you
Which is a
get in,
sad, in my opinion, indictment on the level of critical
why,
thinking in America.
okay, perhaps, but we watched a lot of cartoons growing up. TV ruined our lives. I'm just saying, uh, you would say that they know have just a little bit of information enough to make it dangerous for them, but I
Well, they
mean,
know Ruby. They know Ruby. They know Ruby killed Oswald 2 days after the assassination, and that on the surface looks very suspicious.
and
Uh,
by the way, we haven't even
and then they
touched.
see back into the left, and they watch JFK in 1991 or whatever it was, and they say, "Oh, I got it solved. It was a conspiracy."
I think I should say right now that I calculated almost 8 years ago, pretty much the only like 6 or 8 things that are the only things facts that everyone agrees on, and it goes something like it was
The
on a
date.
Friday, it was on a Friday, it was
Yeah, the
on,
date. Okay.
it was November 22nd, it was in Dallas. Kennedy was killed, Tippit was
Yeah.
killed.
He was
Uh,
driving in a limo, or maybe they don't agree on that.
um, um,
I
uh,
don't agree.
Ruby killed Oswald, although in the past few years, as I said, that's changed a little bit for some
Yep.
people. But Ruby killed Oswald,
Oswald's not alive.
and then and then
Except some people think a different Oswald was buried. That was
and
because Marina was convinced by the
yeah,
conspiracy theorists to dig him up. Anyway,
Uh,
sorry I interrupted.
that's okay. And then the last one is Ruby died while in police custody, and those 7 or 8 things are the only thing that everyone agrees upon.
So basically, every other issue are essentially core issues that are not resolved and
Yeah,
probably will never be resolved.
yeah.
okay,
Which
I'm good.
go ahead.
I just got to say again, Josh, congratulations on stepping full uh head up into the fray, but you have not yet been deluged by the people who don't remember that there were six people in the car. That hasn't happened to you yet, and I'm predicting that it will. Because if you put up a picture of the limo, what's going to happen next is people are going to try to tell you what the Mandela effect is, and they're going to get it wrong. They're going to say, "This isn't the car I ever saw. The one I saw only had four seats in it. It must be a Mandela effect," by which they mean incorrectly that we're living on some sort of alternative timeline, that we're in a, Avengers, Marvel universe parallel, what's the word? The metaverse,
I mean, that
uh,
gets into articles of
multiverse.
faith as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there, I mean, the amount of time I've tried to explain that the Mandela effect is not what you think it means. But anyway, I forgot where we were going with this. I think
Well,
there's a
one thing I'll say too is you mentioned this, and I do agree with you that uh, Oswald Onlyists start to hold certain things. Some Oswald Onlyists start to hold things as a matter of faith, and I don't know that I would say some people hold the Warren Report as a holy text, to use a metaphor. I get. Um, I think most Oswald Onlyists, the yeah, just most of them could care less that the Warren Report was what it was. They care about what the evidence says in the Warren Report. And so I'll say that. But the whole idea of your belief about the JFK assassination becomes a tenet of faith is equally true if not more so true, of the conspiracy theorists. They are the ones who've solved it, that it's not the official story, it's a different story, and they hold that as an article of faith, as a tenet of faith, and they refuse to change their mind. That goes both ways for sure. And I would say it probably happens more on the conspiracy theorist side, but I'm sure we disagree with that.
And that
I'm, I'll actually concede that point, debate over, because I, you know, it's this is a good time. Uh, I'd be happy to do it again. Um, I'd be delighted if both of you would come on a TikTok live and just sit there in the box, and you don't even have to say anything except be party to the nuttiness, and then just randomly let somebody up in the box from the audience to get their chance to say what they want to say to you, and then you have to on the fly agree with them or debunk them like right away, and then somehow you have to get them out of the box. My you know that it's fun, but it's also really challenging. So again, one of the core issues, and Josh and I will agree on this. One of the core issues, unresolved, is that there is so much disinformation out there and things that we ought to be able to agree on, and that Josh and I probably do agree on. People get it wrong because history has been, slowly rewritten by the winners. Uh, Unfortunately, that's my worldview. Um, but just the way we consume media in 30-second bites, and the way disinformation and propaganda is spread, uh, started on November 23rd, 1963, and has gotten worse since then. And so that's why I spend more time. I'm only partially joking when I say that I spend as much time debunking conspiracy theories, maybe more time than I do uh, promoting them. Uh, I ask questions. I look into things. I'm interested in stuff I've never heard, uh, and I think it's a journey that I'm happy to be on. And that's also why I say I'm okay with the case not being solved.
that goes into our second to last uh, thing on the list. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. The spectrum of conspiracy theories.
Oh,
Spectrum of conspiracy
I
theory.
mean,
Gosh.
let's hit the ones that we agree on. The driver didn't do it.
right.
The sewer man didn't. There was no shot from the
No storm
sewer.
drain. No storm drain.
Secret Service didn't do it.
George
Hickey didn't
Hickey didn't do it.
didn't. Yeah. Well, now how about Umbrella Man? Umbrella Man, did he have a contraption in his umbrella to fire the
Oh,
shot?
no, no. I don't like Umbrella Man. I think he's fishy, but I do not think he had a rifle or some sort of weapon in
Yeah.
his umbrella.
I've been
That's
contemplating a TikTok about the diagram, one of the diagrams I've seen that I mean
yeah.
to me is laughable. But now this starts to get into not so crazy, perhaps on your end, but I think it's crazy in to unfortunately use that term. LBJ. I don't think LBJ did it, and I think it's wild to think that he did. Now, I can see the motivation to think that because, of course, he has some motive to of anyone to be behind it. But the tortured path you have to take to get there is a house of cards to me. Um, so,
Okay,
and there's many others, but
so right on the LBJ point, so I've softened or altered my view of that, and I don't think that there's any chance that LBJ uh says to James Angleton or whoever, and says, hey, you know what would be a good idea would be for you to plant a guy in a high-rise building with a high-power rifle, and take shots on the motorcade. That, by the way, I'll be there in the middle of it, and my wife will be with me. Like that, that's not a thing that he would have done. So I don't believe that LBJ.
it's really good cover though. It's great cover.
Oh, it's the ultimate alibi, right? Perhaps. Right. No, I don't. I think if you want to talk about the real conspiracy, I think that LBJ is knee deep in the conspiracy to cover up. That's a different topic. As far as LBJ uh, orchestrating the
Well,
mechanics
cover
of
up
November,
in crafted narrative, maybe, or
yes,
maybe that's semantics. And I don't necessarily think an Oswald onlyist could agree with that, and still Oswald acted alone. Um, so anyway,
and
because
still there
governments
was
do what they do, bureaucrats do what they do.
right,
They
right.
Bureaucrat's been a
Sometimes
bureaucrat.
sometimes that is what I am referring to when I say there's no doubt there was a conspiracy. But I don't always make that clear, right? So I leave it open for interpretation. But I think LBJ is complicit in sort of the way the whole thing was handled, and he was deep cahoots with J. Edgar Hoover, deep cahoots. But moving on, how do you feel about Jackie did it?
Also extremely laughable.
I'm
So
just saying, if you want to go
yeah,
down the list of what I see,
There's a
Jack,
old book that some guy wrote, his name called The Killer Queen. Maybe I shouldn't even mention it or give it even a breath of
never
attention.
heard of it, but I can
well,
imagine.
It
here's
said, it
that's
says
a
Jackie actually fired the shot with
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
that see that's a jumping off point though for the other, I hate to say this, more plausible conspiracies. Because some of the ones we've just listed, at least in my view, start to fall on the side of the metaphorical flat earth theories of JFK assassination lore. And I don't know if you've gone down the rabbit hole of flat eartherism. I have just a little bit. And maybe in future versions of Reason and Reality, I'll start covering that. But for now, I got my hands full with JFK. But when you sit and you listen to even debates or discussions from between someone who's a physicist or something who knows their science and has got PhDs or whatever, and someone who is a flat earther, the flat earther has answers to it all, and to a casual, uninformed Dunning-Kruger type observer, they sound legit. And flat eartherism sounds credible and defensible. And that is the same type of phenomenon that happens with basically every conspiracy theory, in my view, with JFK. When you don't know what you don't know, when you think you're more informed than you are, and you bring your worldview to a question like the JFK assassination, you start to glob on to things that satisfy or confirm your biases, and then you say it's a conspiracy. I don't know how, because to me there is not a single one. The mafia, anti-Castro Cubans, the Secret Service, the CIA, the military industrial complex. I'm sure I'm missing a whole lot of others. Not a single one, please tell me where I'm wrong, has given as coherent and as parsimonious an answer as Oswald acted alone. And I do subscribe. I haven't said this. This is not going to be a surprise to anybody, but I do subscribe to the whole Occam's razor view. And the Occam's razor view is Oswald acted alone. And so anyway, that was a little bit of rambling, but when you don't know what you don't know and you overestimate your capabilities and you don't rely on or aren't willing to trust experts, which is a big problem in society as well, for a lot of other things outside of JFK, you start to believe the earth is flat, or you start to believe that the mafia was behind Kennedy's assassination, or pick your other theory.
Skip. Do you want to?
I've left him speechless.
uh, I have I have ladybugs in the basement, and they're landing all over everything, and it's really
You
By
might
the
bothering me.
way, I
you
will
might be
I will
doing
commend Matt. I will commend you, Matt, for biting your tongue this whole time, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah,
it.
no doubt,
I,
no doubt. On
I
the other
just
hand,
texted someone be I texted someone OMG, being a moderator is excruciating because I can't say anything.
No,
Yeah, yeah,
listen,
yeah. We should have a discussion amongst the three of us. I'll be the whipping boy if you want to, aside
you,
from this.
Matt, Matt deserves a break because he makes these things happen, and he's passionate about the topic, and has done a lot of work on it.
So the topic was spectrum of conspiracy theories. I think we covered that. So this brings us to our final one, final question, which says, why does it matter after 62 years?
I think I've alluded to a lot of this or already said it, but I'll maybe try to restate it. I think it's a microcosm for so many things that go on today, and it comes down to, in many respects, how do we know what's reality, what's true, what's real in this world? Um, again, if we live in a world where people legitimately think and even in good faith, as much as it pains me to say, if we live in a world where people think the earth is flat, or that we didn't go to the moon, or that 9/11 was an inside job, or that QAnon exists, and all the everything that implicates Hollywood and pedophile rings and on, and they're tied to Epstein and the vaccine debate, and go down the list. If we live in that world, and fake news and whatever, truth and reality matters, and how we understand and how we can um, analyze and determine what's real is critical. And the JFK assassination is just like a very easy, concrete manifestation of all of those types of problems. And um, you know, I think I would be curious what Skip's audience is, but if I look at my analytics, which is a fraction of Skip's audience, it's like 50-year-old men and older are who watch my TikToks. We get to this phase of life where we have to start asking these types of questions, and we glob on to, because we live in this world of truth, question, and misinformation, and we glob on to something like the JFK assassination to sort of satisfy our appetite to find out what's real in this world. So I think that's why it's important. I also think Skip has alluded to this. I agree with him. Distrust of government exists, and rightfully so in many respects. I am firmly anti-bureaucracy and bureaucrats. As a lawyer, they make life actually they give lawyers jobs, so maybe I shouldn't say this, but they make life difficult, and it government should be looked upon with skepticism or suspicion. Um, we shouldn't just trust everything that government or even other leaders in our lives say. We have to find our own way to be rational and use critical thinking and uh, learn how to understand the world around us. And it's just the JFK assassination is a tangible way to do that.
All right, Skip, why does it matter after 62 years?
I It's easy for me to uh, almost completely agree, and I'm not even sure where he and I like part in. So I'm just going to say I'm 98% on board. Are surrounding a topic on which we are represent the two sides, right? We can agree on this, and so I have attempted to answer. I get at least one question a day, or a comment saying, the guy's been dead 62 years, let it go,
Yep. I've had
or
some of those.
nothing matters. This doesn't matter anymore. We've got far bigger problems facing us. I think, though, that history is useful. And this is why I'm interested in all of history. They said pick a topic for your TikTok, and stick to it. Like, be very niche, specific, Because if you're just out there doing silly dances, that's not, you pick a topic and you stick with it. So I'm like, oh, I know. And that's how I got started. Uh, why it matters, though, why the study of history matters is because it informs what we see going on today. And here's the thing. I'm not, you guys, not your fault. You're a little younger than I am. I'm coming from the perspective of a guy who will turn 60, and I'm like, wow. I was born in 1967. Okay, that makes me 58. I wasn't alive when all of this happened. Uh, why does it matter to me? I wasn't even there. I don't have the memory of where you were in school when you heard the news. Our parents had that memory. Uh, But I say two things happened so that you understand culture and what's happening today that ties to what Josh is absolutely, absolutely correct in saying. November 22nd, two things happened. And the first of those was uh, we started, as a country, we started getting our news in a much different way. And prior to that, people relied heavily on newspaper. Not everybody even had a TV. So here was this earth-shattering TV, and suddenly it was wall-to-wall coverage that entire weekend. That fundamentally changed the way we covered news. The whole live cameras in the basement of the Dallas police station understand that our world changed at that moment, not because Oswald was shot, but because we were there. We watched it live on television. Think about the import of that and how that changes us as a culture. I think you can point to November 22nd as an actual tangible pivot point in the way that we get our news, the way we get informed, and the way we form our own opinions of things and how it happened. Then the Warren Report comes out in 1964, and I think that's a pivotal moment because then I think up to that point, there was at least a general trust of our elected leaders and our government. And no matter whether you were a Democrat or a Republican in 1963, uh, what you started to realize in 1964 was, hey, wait a second, I'm not sure we're getting the whole story here. So I think you can point to the assassination event as a pivotal moment in which we lose our innocence and we start saying not all is as it should be. Uh, how could this happen? But even more so, why are we like we're being told a specific thing, and there's obviously some things that they're overlooking. I'm not saying conspiracy start theories started there. What I am saying is generally speaking, as a population, we started to doubt what we were being told by the government. And understanding that, I think it fits. I think it is parallel and complementary to exactly what Josh is saying also. And I've sort of started uh, from the top down on the subject, rather than at the granular level. Uh, because that's really where most people start. Like, how could this have happened? Um, anyway, I don't know if that covers it or not, but that's usually my standard answer when people ask me why it matters. Well, look what it did to us.
Gentlemen, we did it. We did it.
Hey, I
We're
had a good time. I want to make that clear.
we only
Yeah, for sure.
we only went like 40 minutes over time, but hey, we did it. Hey guys, thank you, Josh, Skip. Thank you guys so much for coming on and having this debate slash roundtable. Hey, you guys are great. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for doing it, Matt. It's good stuff.
It's been my pleasure, and I think all of us we've had a good time. I appreciate you hosting it, and keep up the good work. Follow
Like,
me on TikTok.
likewise for both of you. All right. Thank you. Good night.
Talk to you
Hey, thanks,
guys
guys.
later.
Yep. See you. Bye.